All right, welcome everyone to today's Google Search Central SEO Office Hours Hangout. My name is John Mueller. I'm a search advocate here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do are these office hour hangouts where people can join in and ask their questions around search. Bunch of questions were submitted already, but we also have people here live. So maybe we can start with the people who are here now and already have their hands raised. Let's see, Michael, I think you're first on the list.
Good morning, John.
Hi.
My question is around Core Web Vitals. And in Search Console, what concerns me is I've seen an increase in my URLs that have been bucketed into the poor category. But unfortunately, with page speed insights, it's impossible for me to validate that or corroborate that information. Do you have any information on, I guess, which tools Google is actually using for the algorithm? And again, what concerns me is the trend that this has happened after the release of the latest core updates. So I'm curious if you could give me any insight and guidance into what tools to trust.
OK. So I think the whole topic of speed is surprisingly complicated in that you look at it and it has like 3 measurements. You're like, oh, I can figure 3 things out. But there are just so many things involved.
I'm sorry to interrupt, John. This is actually a CLS issue. So this one is not speed, but yeah. Similar problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe first of all, just to be clear, the whole page experience update is completely unrelated to the core updates. So the core updates that you might see happening or that we announce, they're more about understanding relevance of a site, so more about the quality and the content of the site. And the page experience update is purely on kind of the Core Web Vitals and the other page experience factors. So that's maybe one thing to keep in mind, that these are really separate. In Search Console, what we show is essentially field data, which we also call real user metrics or RUM data, which is essentially data that's collected from users when they go to your website. So that's essentially kind of the scale on which we operate there. The most pure measure that we can get, essentially, because this is what users actually see. And page speed insights and some of the other tools, they are so-called lab tests, which are essentially kind of emulations of the field data, where basically they run similar calculations and they make assumptions and say that on average, users are probably like this, have this kind of a connection, this kind of a screen, do this kind of thing on their phones. And we'll try to estimate what those metrics could be. And because of that, you might see differences across the data in Search Console and the data that you see when you run the tests yourself. Because the tests, when you run them yourself, are essentially estimations. And in Search Console, we see what users actually saw. So that's kind of I think the main difference there. And that applies to speed, CLS, first input delay, all of that. And I think, especially with regards to CLS, that's something where sometimes you have weird things that play in there which are kind of hard to figure out. Where, for example, if users in your country see the page completely normally, and users in the primary location of your site, where most users are, they see maybe a pop-up or something that comes up in between, which shifts the CLS around. Then when you test it yourself, you might think, well, this metric looks OK, but what users actually see is slightly different. With regards to CLS, I think that's sometimes super hard to pinpoint. What I would recommend doing there is trying to make some simplified pages and trying to see if you can see what users might be seeing, so that you can narrow down a little bit which elements on the page are actually causing this shift. What you can also do is kind of instrument the pages yourself. So in web.dev, we have some JavaScript libraries that you can use where essentially you add the code to your pages, and then it reports through Google Analytics or some other analytics tool that you use the metrics that users are actually seeing. That lets you get data a little bit faster. Because in Search Console, because of the way that we aggregate the data, that's always about 28 days delayed. So if you make a change now, it takes almost a month for you to see that in Search Console. And if you instrument the pages yourself, you can do things like A/B testing and track that. You can see, essentially, if you release something today, you can check tomorrow what users actually saw there. And you can narrow things down a little bit faster. And once you've figured out which elements on the page are causing this CLS shift, then you can kind of work to improve that on the site. So that's kind of the direction that I would go there, kind of using the field data that you see in Search Console as a way of recognizing, oh, there's an issue, and then trying to narrow that down iteratively, and using the lab tests to kind of confirm that you're on the right track there, and to try to reproduce what users are actually seeing.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Let's see, Julian.
Hey, John. How's it going?
Hi. Pretty good.
So I have a two-part question about Google evaluating website quality. So in the past office hours, you've talked about if the overall quality of a website is an issue, specifically if it has tens of thousands of pages or more, that aggressively de-indexing low-quality pages is a good idea, which makes sense. So removing bad pages from the index that haven't had a chance to meet a certain quality threshold just yet with good user-generated content. And I guess all of this in an effort to make Google reconsider the quality of the website as a whole. So we have a website in that camp, and in the last couple of months, we've made an effort to do just that. And in the past office hours, you've said it can take months or even up to half a year for Google to recalculate the quality and treat a website differently in search. So question one would be, do you sort of stand by that time frame? And can anything affect the time frame, and is it sort of correlated to the size of a website? And then a quick follow-up for question two is, if we're a small team and with SEO being our primary acquisition channel, how would you suggest measuring that was indeed the problem that we tackled? So for instance, like, would you look for gradual improvement, or would it sort of be like flat for many months, and then you sort of would see things shoot up if we indeed did do the right thing? Because I guess it's a scary proposition to sort of remove thin pages from your index and then wait 6 months and then see if you've done enough, Yeah. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I think the timeline is probably about right. I'm sure there are situations where it can go a little bit faster, but on a whole, that's probably something which takes that, I don't know, half year or longer almost for things to kind of settle down. And it's, I think, partially due to kind of us needing to re-index everything on the site, understanding the site again, partially also just because all of the quality signals that we collect, they just take a long time to kind of be built up. So that's something where a couple of months, half a year, maybe even a bit longer, I think that would be kind of the norm. I'm sure there are situations where it can be faster, but for the most part, it's probably in that range. With regards to recognizing when you're kind of on the right track, I think that's super hard. Because on the one hand, you have the situation where you're removing pages. So you might see kind of like a drop in traffic from those pages. I think overall, if you look at the metrics for your site, the pages that you remove are probably pages that don't get a ton of page views. So maybe that's something that wouldn't pull down your overall traffic from search, or not that much. But it takes a long time for things to kind of start seeing more and more traffic and kind of being picked up as being higher quality. So one thing I would try to do is to try to find some other proxy metrics that you can use for recognizing the quality of your site. And that could be something like looking into analytics and looking at things like, I think like they call it the engagement rate now, or other metrics where you have kind of time on site, where you have something where when you look at the metrics now, or when you compare to the metrics that you had maybe a month ago before you started working on this, you can tell that actually those were pretty bad. And with these improvements, we see kind of this shift in user behavior. And it's not so much that we would use that user behavior directly in search, but it's something that's more like a leading indicator for you to let you know that you're on the right track. So that's kind of the direction I would look at it there. On the one hand, kind of you shouldn't see a big drop from the pages that you remove. You should see kind of like this slight subtle shift in user behavior through the other metrics that you track. And then over the course of, I don't know, a couple of months, you probably see like a gradual increase. And then at some point, you see maybe a bigger jump happening.
OK. And thanks. That really helps. So would one strategy that you recommend be, could you test a small subset of pages, take some of the better quality ones, and maybe do like a campaign around them to sort of get them shared around a little bit if you believe in that they're good quality? Would that expedite the reconsideration of just those pages by any chance? Or is it kind of more like, no, if you have a website quality issue as a whole, those might see a suppression too, no matter what?
I think for tracking the metrics yourself, if you're looking at analytics, that's definitely a good way to look at it. Where if you can drive traffic there and say, it's like instead of, I don't know, 50 people a day coming to these pages, you have 1,000 people coming to those pages, you have a little bit clearer metrics. From an SEO point of view, from a kind of a Google search quality point of view, I don't think taking a small subset of a site and improving the quality of that would be enough to make us say, oh, this is a different part of a site, and this is high quality, and this is kind of medium quality. We'll treat it differently. I think for the most part, we would look at it, or try to look at it as an overhaul thing. And it might be that the small set that you improved kind of moved the overall average up a little bit higher, but that's not something I would kind of wait for. Because if you're talking about a half a year and you improve 10% of your pages, and after half a year you realize, oh, I need to improve even more, like you've kind of wasted a lot of time there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. OK, cool. Thank you so much.
Sure. Tom.
Hey, John. A couple of months ago on one of these Hangouts, I was asking some questions about the book structured data and getting an entry point in the search results. So we went away and we made some changes to how we had implemented that and made it all correct because there were some errors. And you very kindly, the last time we spoke, offered to give the internal team a nudge, or basically just give someone a heads up to check the inbox on that Google form. So basically it's just a question to see if that would be possible for you to do, or if I should send you a tweet to give you just like a little nudge next week, or what the best process would be.
Probably easiest just to send me a short tweet and some kind of details of what it actually was. So I can double check what they said there. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much. That was
cool.
it. Short and sweet.
Or drop some information here in the chat, then I can pick that up afterwards.
All right. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Cool. Jason.
Cool. Thanks, John. So some background. Our systems and content delivery network are designed to let all real users view our content and filter out some bots while letting others like Googlebot through. And just for some additional context, earlier this year, we changed our server monitoring suite, and we thought we'd carried over all of the reporting needs we had to ensure that, Googlebot could access our content. Unfortunately, it seems we'd missed some and noticed in Search Console some 500 series errors cropping up starting late last month. The question came up from our technology team whether this represented real user impact and why we would look specifically at Googlebot and not real user metrics to prove that there's an issue here. So given that context, I have a few questions. The first is just to get the technology concern out of the way. From your perspective, how does Googlebot view 500 series errors, and could you give any clarity on established thresholds at which point Googlebot will crawl source content less based on those errors?
We don't have any strong thresholds on that. But essentially what happens with 500 errors is we'll try to retry them. And if we continue to see that there are 500 errors, then we will kind of slow down crawling. And if we continue to see that there are 500 errors, then we will drop those URLs from the index. So that's something where if every now and then individual pages have a 500 error, it's like no big deal. Like we'll retry them. They'll remain indexed. And the next time we retry them, that's fine. But if a large part of a site consistently has 500 errors, then we might assume that maybe we're causing the problem. And we'll slow down crawling of the whole site. And at some point, we'll say, well, it looks like these pages are really gone. We're going to drop them. So that's essentially the effects that you would see there. And if you're talking about a large site and wondering like what percentage of 500 errors is OK, I don't know. My feeling is if you're seeing something more than 1%, then that sounds like something is kind of broken and probably would be something where we would start to slow down. But I don't think we have any hard thresholds where we'd say like this many requests and this many errors means this much slowing down.
OK, cool. Thank you. Also, our server logs show a 200 given to Googlebot at the same timestamp as the 504 in Search Console. Our content delivery network is telling us that if Googlebot gets a 504 from a CDN, then they'll automatically try to fetch from the origin. Could you confirm, deny, or possibly confuse that for me?
I don't think we do anything special with regards to 504, but I kind of need to. I'd have to double check. So in the search developer documentation, we just put up a page with all of the HTTP status codes and how we react to that. I don't think we have anything where we would say we would defer to the origin rather than a CDN, because we don't actually see that difference. Because from our point of view, we access the domain name. And if the domain name resolves to the CDN, then that's what we get. We're not going to say, well, we will take a different IP address and then try again.
OK, cool. That actually will help further that discussion with our CDN. So thank you. Final question. If I manage a website for a tea shop, will setting all of my pages to a 418 help me rank better? That's I'm a
Probably
teapot.
not. Probably not. No, I actually don't know what we would do with that. We'd probably drop them as 400 errors. So that seems like a bad idea. Sorry.
I just love the 418 status code. It's just so fun.
So weird. Yeah, I don't know how that snuck in there. I wonder if we can add something new. Cool. Daniel.
Yeah, so I've got a client that's currently going through a site migration, and they've changed the architecture quite a bit, shifted some things around. I just wanted to share an example of the current site and the new site. So in the chat, I've sent over the current site. So if you navigate to that page, you'll see that on that page, their subcategory pages are split into tiles. So you got all adhesives, adhesive vinyl, foil sheets, etc. So these are all on-page links. And then if you look at the current staging site, they're doing away with those internal links for that page, say, or across all those top category pages, and they're inserting them into the main navigation. So my main concern going through a site migration, or going through a site migration, is always a tense. I feel like an intense experience to make sure that we don't lose any visibility, that kind of, the old site's really, really talking to the current one. So my question is around how you handle links and navigation as opposed to on-page links. My understanding is that if we've got, let's say, a lot of backlinks, natural backlinks that go into that category page, all that link acquisition, so that all those all that link equity is getting split between all the links off the page. But if we don't no longer have those links on that specific page and we've got them into the navigation, is Google really treating the navigation as the same? Because I would have thought that all of a sudden those individual links now become thousands and thousands of links into the subcategory. So my main concern is that we go from one site to the other and then we start to see rankings drop because that page no longer doesn't have the power that it did, because it's now not a link off a page, but a link off the navigation. So I kind of wanted to get a good idea because I'm sure they'll absolutely kill me if we do lose any visibility during this process. So kind of any information you can give me is guidance. At the minute, I've advised them to revert back to the tiled type of way, because it's a collection type page. It's Shopify, it probably won't work. So yeah, so it'd be good to get your kind of feedback and guidance on the different structures.
Yeah, I think they can both work. So I wouldn't necessarily say that one is good and the other is bad. It's kind of tricky for me to say like what the actual effect will be, because it's kind of like a new site structure. What I would watch out for is to try to avoid changing the URLs. So with regards to the URLs that you had there, one is kind of like a page/adhesives, and the other one is collection/all adhesives. So you're changing page URLs there. That's something that always kind of means we have to kind of restructure what we have indexed for your site and kind of understand what the context of the new pages is. You have to make sure that the redirect's in place or what have you there. So that's kind of the one thing there with regards to moving those links from a collection page to the navigation, where probably that navigation is shared across the whole site. I think both of those approaches could work. What probably would happen here is the category pages would lose a little bit visibility in favor of the kind of lower level pages that you're linking to directly from the navigation. Because
so the flip then, because I would have thought it was the other way around. OK, interesting.
Because you're kind of linking to the lower level pages from across the site rather than just linking to the categories from across the site in that change, right?
Yeah, they both will be in there. So say if we call it the main category and subcategory pages should be in that navigation. Well, I would have thought that, all the main category pages will be in the navigation and then the subcategory. But they have, say, over 3,000 collection pages, so they all won't fit. So these other pages will be on like an A to Z page as well. And that's another thing that concerns me, because now we're kind of taking these URLs and put it into the corner of the website, all linking off one page. So I think that might be an issue. So I think if there's, if there are really important pages, they shouldn't exist there, but they have to exist in the main navigation. Would you say that would be a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think kind of like the A to Z pages, that's something where you're basically telling us these are a lot less relevant than they used to be, which might be fine. Where if you can say, like, I really want to concentrate on these other things, then you kind of have to balance that and say, I really want this, so I have to let go of this. And that might be perfectly fine. And similarly, with kind of that switch from focusing on the category pages for search to kind of the next level or the lower level pages, again, that's something that is almost like a strategic decision, where if you see that the competition for category level queries in search is such that you'll still be visible there because like you're really strong in that area, then maybe it's OK to say, well, I'll make sure that the lower level pages, kind of the long tail, is a lot stronger. And you're kind of balancing, I don't know, like almost like short tail versus long tail. And it's almost like a strategic decision where there's no right or wrong, but it's more like, well, in your situation, in your market, with your site, what makes more sense? Do we need to concentrate more? Can we already kind of spread out a little bit broader? And from my point of view, it's not a matter of technically correct, because both of these could be technically correct. It's more like, what do you want to focus on?
Yeah. So we would just say that if these we'll call them subcategory pages, but if they went into the navigation, that you know, Google sees them as more important because we've put them in the main navigation. So in theory, fingers crossed, they wouldn't lose visibility. Maybe they might gain or at least maintain what they've got. I know it's difficult to tell, but
I mean, so I don't know the whole site, so it's hard for me to say offhand just by looking at these two pages. But I'm assuming that the main category pages were already linked across the site on the old version.
And
exactly. With the new one, the main category pages will be linked, as well as subcategories and maybe even products, so something along that line. Yeah. So from my point of view, what would happen there is the main category pages, because they're a part of this bigger set of pages that are now linked across the site, they would lose a little bit relative strength. So some of that strength would be kind of distributed to the other pages. So it's not that the main pages would remain the same because they're still linked from the same pages. It's just from all of those same pages, you now link to lots of other pages. So you're kind of like spreading the value a little bit broader.
Throughout the navigation, is what you're saying. Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, okay. Okay, and it's not, is it considered thousands? Sorry to take up so much time, but is it considered thousands? Because again, it's every single page is a new URL, and we've got 100,000 pages. So is that 100,000 internal links, or are you just looking at them? You know it's a navigation, so you're just looking at it. I don't know.
I think we would still count them as internal links, but I wouldn't worry so much about the number. One of the things that I like to do with my test sites is to do something like running Screaming Frog over them and generating that, I don't know, that tree graph or something. They have something like that, where you have like kind of like how the internal links are spread out. And based on that, you sometimes see, well, it's like all concentrated in the middle, or it's like it has clear category structures there. And that's essentially a shift that you're doing there. You're kind of taking things that were kind of linked further out and bringing them closer in, which means you're kind of like spreading that value in that internal circle a little bit broader.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. That gives me something to go back with.
OK, cool. Let me go through some of the submitted questions. I'll get to the rest of you as well. Don't worry. And we have a little bit more time too afterwards to kind of go through the remaining stuff as well. But just to make sure that the submitted questions don't get ignored, 20% of my pages are not getting indexed. It says they're discovered but not crawled. Does this have anything to do with the fact that it's not crawled because of potential overload of my server? Or does it have to do with the quality of the page? Probably a little bit of both. So usually, if we're talking about a smaller site, then it's not, or mostly not, a case that we're limited by the crawling capacity, which is kind of the crawl budget side of things. If we're talking about a site that has millions of pages, then that's something where I would consider looking at the crawl budget side of things. But smaller sites, probably less so. With regards to the quality, when it comes to understanding the quality of a website, that is something that we take into account quite strongly with regards to crawling and indexing of the rest of the website. But that's not something that's necessarily related to the individual URL. So if you have 5 pages that are not indexed at the moment, it's not that those 5 pages are the ones we would consider low quality. It's more that, well, overall, we consider this website maybe to be a little bit lower quality, and therefore we won't go off and index everything on this site. Because if we don't have that page indexed, then we're not really going to know if that's high quality or low quality. So that's kind of the direction I would head there, is if you have a smaller site and you're seeing that a significant part of your pages are not being indexed, then I would take a step back and try to reconsider the overall quality of the website and not focus so much on technical issues for those pages, because I think for the most part, sites nowadays are technically kind of reasonable. If you're using a common CMS, then it's really hard to do something really wrong. And it's often more a matter of kind of the overall quality. The other thing to keep in mind with regards to indexing is it's completely normal that we don't index everything off of a website. So if you look at any larger website or any even mid-size or smaller website, you'll see fluctuations in indexing. It'll go up and down. And it's never going to be the case that we index 100% of everything that's on a website. So if you have 100 pages and, I don't know, 80 of them are being indexed, then I wouldn't see that as being a problem that you need to fix. That's sometimes just how it is for the moment. And over time, when you get to like 200 pages on your website and we index 180 of them, then like that percentage gets a little bit smaller. But it's always going to be the case that we don't index 100% of everything that we know about. Let's see, question about homepage versus landing page. When it comes to SEO rankings, if I have a small brochure website, should I be focused on keywords I want to rank for on the homepage? For example, would I want to rank for roofing company and location? I could set up the homepage as construction company with different surfaces. But I also want to rank for roofing. Is there best practice to follow for these situations? So I think this is kind of similar to the question before, where it kind of boils down to kind of what you want to focus on. And especially if you're a new website, then picking some specific area to focus on and kind of building up your strength there makes a lot of sense. And sometimes it makes sense to pick an area where maybe there's not a lot of competition, maybe where you're one of the few companies in that area that offers that service, just so that you can kind of slowly build up your reputation and the things that you do on your website for those kind of queries. And then from there, you can kind of expand. So that would be generally my recommendation here when it comes to smaller businesses. Don't just create the website and put everything on there all at the same time in the hope that maybe like one of these will end up ranking. Because what will usually happen is we'll look at all of this and say, well, there's a bit of everything here, but there's no really strong things here that we should focus on for ranking. The other thing to maybe also keep in mind if you're a really small business is if you're locally active, then sometimes kind of the traditional SEO things are not the most critical things that you need to do, in the sense that maybe a lot of the traffic that goes to your website is more from local searches. And when it comes to local searches, the Google My Business side of things is slightly different there. And maybe that's worthwhile to kind of say, well, I'll put everything on my website just as a place to kind of collect things, but I'm not using that in a sense of actively doing SEO and trying to rank for, I don't know, roofing services worldwide, because I'm just focusing on my small area where I'm actually active in. And in cases like that, sometimes just focusing on the Google My Business side of things might make a lot of sense. Let's see, what would be a better strategy? Having a 404 page for pages that don't exist, or redirecting any non-existent page to the homepage. Our website is recovering from a malware attack in which tens of thousands of pages that were made were redirecting to some shady website. We're fixing it, but now we probably have 150,000 pages with 404 errors in Search Console. Yeah, I don't know. Recovering from malware is always super annoying and a lot of work. So hopefully it goes well. And hopefully you can lock things down to avoid this kind of situation in the future. In practice, in a situation like that, I don't think there's any big difference with regards to doing a 404 page or redirecting to the home page. If you redirect to the home page, we'll probably see that as kind of a 404 page for the page that was redirecting there. And we will treat that similarly. So we would call this a soft 404 page. I think in practice, both of these will be similar in terms of the time that it takes to settle down. What I would try to do in a case like this is focus on the most important pages of your website and make sure that all of those work really well, and make sure that those are updated in search. And all of the rest, I I don't know, probably 404 is the easiest approach here, where if you just remove those pages, it returns 404 by default. And I would just give that maybe a half a year or even longer to kind of settle down and drop out of the index. If you actively keep looking for those pages, we will continue to show them to you, because we think, well, you're looking for this URL, so we will show it to you. But for users, probably they see your primary pages in the search results, and they would not even notice that maybe there was also some hacked content on your website. So it's easy to kind of get dragged into a situation where you're focusing on an issue that actually users don't see in practice. And that's something to kind of watch out for, I think, here. So I think 404 or redirecting, both of those are OK. Some people also use sitemap files to make sure that we crawl them a little bit faster. I don't think that really matters when you're talking about 150,000 pages that used to have malware on them. I would just let them drop out naturally. Let's see, long question. And this is from Mike. And I see you're up next, Mike. Maybe you can just run us through it briefly.
Yeah, sorry. I tried to put a short thing down, but I just couldn't. So probably best if I probably will do quicker like this. So I'm just trying to decide whether it's worthwhile creating unique URLs for each country that the site is relevant for. The site's relevant for, say, like 5 English-speaking countries. And at the moment, there's just one URL. And since the majority of the traffic is from the US, that's fine. And if the user's not from the US, then there's a pop-up which says, click here, and it will load then their country's content and set a cookie so that that's not a problem in future. And now I came across, you were talking around in a webmasters from 2016 where you were saying, like, if you've got lots of very, very similar content, or maybe you were talking about like identical content, it may not be the best idea to create like unique URLs for different countries and to use hreflang and geo targeting as well. I've done lots of research on this. I'm still like just completely, I don't know whether it's going to be counterproductive to do this in terms of, it's going to reach more. I know with hreflangs, what I seem to understand is it basically just swaps out. So there'll be no ranking boost. And so that the only benefit there would be an improve in bounce rate or a lower in bounce rate, which could improve ranking, which may be worth it, may not, with regards to the tech side of things. But with regards to the geo targeting, I guess the first question is, with regards to like if I was to use subfolders by geo targeting, does that just mean setting up the country in international targeting in the search console to each country? And would that, and given that there'll be a lot of duplicate content across each country, is that a good thing? Would you say that this is a sensible thing, given there's a considerable amount of duplicate content, or would you say no, don't do that, just stick with is it going to be counterproductive to do that?
It depends, to be kind of cliche, I guess. What kind of site is it? Is it like an e-commerce site where you have products that are for sale, or is it more like a handful of services?
It's got reviews for TV shows on streaming services. So it would be, like someone will be searching for like, good horror movies on Netflix or something like that, which could be, most of the time. I mean, sometimes they'll add in their country in there, and a lot of the pages are, they'll have the review, but there'll be the list, but the list will change because the availability will be different across each thing. So that means it definitely needs to be. That means it'd be very useless to the user to have, for them to be like, oh, this is available, but there will be a significant amount of duplicate content because a lot of the shows are the same across each, particularly the English-speaking countries.
Now, so maybe taking the easiest one first. When it comes to geo-targeting, that would help us with ranking and boost the ranking when we think that a user is looking for something local. For example, if someone is searching for washing machine manuals, then we could just show kind of washing machine manuals globally. They're not looking for something local, but if they're looking for washing machine repair, then obviously they're probably looking for something more local. And in a case like that, we would try to show the more local content. When it comes to kind of reviews of TV shows or movies, I suspect there's not that much of a kind of a local intent when it comes to the queries there. So probably you would not see a significant change with regards to ranking, with regards to geo-targeting there.
Right.
So that's kind of my assumption there. I don't know the market that much. If people are actually looking for something local when they're looking for, I don't know, horror movie reviews or something like that, it might be. But offhand, I would assume it's more of a global thing.
Right.
So geo-targeting probably doesn't make that much sense in that case.
Well, if they're looking for like horror movies on Netflix, it will be they'll definitely want the list on on the Netflix one. But yeah, but it will be it'll be slight changes across it. So I can see.
Now, if you wanted to do geo-targeting, you could use folders, and you just verify those folders separately in Search Console, and then set the geo-targeting in Search Console there. But
could that be counterproductive though, because it's a lot of duplicate content? Could that just be like,
I think it could, because you're kind of diluting the value of your content across all of those different country versions.
Yeah.
But it's also something where I think, like in your situation, probably geo-targeting wouldn't make much sense there.
Okay, good. Good, thanks.
When it comes to hreflang, I could see that being something that helps there. But you also have the situation there that you essentially create separate URLs, and they have to be indexed separately, and they have to be ranked separately. And when we show them in search, we can swap them out. But they have to be kind of like standing on their own. And if you're taking something like a horror movie review page and just creating different country versions of that, I could imagine that kind of reduces the strength of your pages relative to the rest of the competition that is out there.
Right.
So if you're like by far #1 for this kind of a query, then going off and doing hreflang for different country versions, like, go for it. But if you're really in a strong competition area where maybe you're ranking #5 or #10 in the search results page, then adding hreflang there just makes it a lot harder for you to kind of grab more foothold there.
Got you. Cool.
So that's kind of the direction I would head there. The nice thing about hreflang, though, is you can do it on a per-page basis. So you can try this out for individual areas. You can try it out for things like maybe detail pages on your site, maybe the home page, maybe specific categories, and just kind of see what happens there. Is it like really something where you see a change in user behavior when they go to those pages, if they're coming from the right country? Or is it something where like you don't see a significant change? If you don't see a significant change in how users react, then probably it's not worthwhile to go off and implement that.
Yeah, it's cool. That's really helpful. Thanks. Can I just ask something slightly different that hopefully will be short, a different section? If there's a problem with the server and there's a very long response time, which Google has like really lowered the crawl rate, which is also annoyingly at the same time there's been lots of thin and duplicate content pages been indexed. To get the crawl rate, is it better to leave the setting in to manually set the crawl rate to be the maximum if that is above what was previously being crawled, or is it better to let Google just do some tests itself using its custom crawl rate?
I think both would work. I suspect if you set it to let Google figure it out, it'll pick up a little bit faster because it'll be able to go past that setting that you apply there. But both of those should work. And it's also something where as soon as we can recognize that your server is actually a lot faster, then usually within a couple of days, maybe a week or so, we'll actually pick up crawling anyway.
Cool. Is it all right to have, just a final question, is it all right to have lots of thin and duplicate content no indexed, or is that going to harm the...
That's perfectly fine.
Right. Good. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Sure. Maybe we'll just go and move on to live questions again. Contact Mentor.
Hello, John. It is Anirudh actually. So,
Hi.
yeah, nice to meet you. So, my question is, so actually, I have a site which is around like 3 month old. So the thing is, when the name of my site is searched, like contact mentor, so that time there is another site which is kind of writing a review on my site. So the review is kind of like very spammy, like it is kind of written like my website is from suspicious domain provider, domain registrar, and show low ratings, and also kind of without any evidence they're showing kind of a wrong thing. And also, like in terms of domain register, I'm using GoDaddy, so there is nothing suspicious from that side. And if I check from other like popular sites which show reviews, so my site is showing fine. So the thing is, so I had emailed their admin that the information, like why is it that way, but I get a response, auto replying a response to kind of pay money to get the site removed. So is there a way like Google can help me in this case? And also there is Trustpilot reviews on that site, so there also they have written the same things. Like many people have written the same thing that I am telling you now.
I don't think we would do anything special in a case like that. It's more something where over time you kind of build up the value of your own website, and more we'll just focus on your website in the search results. So that's not something where we would go off and say, oh, the information for this one page is not good on this one site. We will remove it from search, or we will rank it lower in the search results. We wouldn't do that kind of manual intervention. So that's something where it's more essentially the best approach here is kind of to move forward and keep working on your own website and ignoring the other ones there, even if they are sometimes ranking for your name as well. And it's in a sense similar to what is considered reputation management, where essentially like someone is creating some content on your name, in this case on your site's name, that you don't like. And if you look up reputation management, there are like a handful of strategies that you can do there, which include things like making sure you have some social profiles with your name, or making sure that other people actually talk about your site in the way that you think is correct, and making sure that kind of the good information is out there as well. And that's something that just takes time. It's not something where you can kind of like focus on the bad content and try to get that removed. You essentially have to move forward in a positive way and kind of like say, oh, I see there are people trying to pull me back, but I will continue my path in moving forward in a positive way.
So the thing is, my site is kind of a mentorship site. So even one person kind of sees that it is a significant loss. And also I have no issue with bad information, but if it is false, like completely false, and I can kind of show that, then would that help anyway?
We wouldn't see that as spam, though. It's like a lot of information on the web is false. And there's some situations where it's really critical for us to make sure that the information we show is correct, which is like areas around finances or medical information. But if it's like information about another business, about another website, then it's like people have different opinions, and sometimes they post something incorrect. They mix things up. That's not something where we would go in and say, we need to fix that manually. And even in cases where it's like medical sites or where it's financial sites, it's not that we go in there and then manually say, oh, this is bad medical information, we will hide it in the search results. But rather, we'll try to improve our algorithms to recognize the correct information and to highlight that a little bit better. And that's not kind of like based on individual sites. It's based on a broader and better understanding of the web as a whole. So even there, we would not go in and manually hide sites just because they have some information that we don't like.
Yeah, I get it, John. Thank you for answering.
No. It's hard work sometimes, and sometimes people are jealous of the successes that you have. So it's like I don't know. It's annoying, but you kind of have to move forward in a positive way. Let's see, Nathan.
Hi, John.
Hi.
So I've been checking a few pages in Search Console which aren't indexed, but they are indexable, and the canonicalization seems to be all in order. And I'm trying to see how I can figure out why these pages aren't indexed. Is there a way that we can see that either in Search Console or via any other way?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Simple answer. Not what I like, but okay.
Next question.
No, I mean it's something where even internally trying to figure out like why a page is not indexed, that's really complicated. And we don't have anything along that line externally available in Search Console where you can say like, but why don't you like this page, Google?
Okay. Our loss. Thanks.
Oh, well. Let's see, Ritu.
Hello.
I can barely hear you.
Hello. Hello.
Very quiet.
I'm
Okay.
audible?
A little bit, yes, better.
Yeah. So I have few questions this week. One question is related to like sitemap. If I see some pages are not present in sitemap but still appearing in Search Console as a 404 and not found. So what can we do for these type of issues? Can you suggest me any?
You can just leave them. So we use sitemaps to help us additionally crawl, but it doesn't replace crawling. So if a page is not in a sitemap, it doesn't mean we won't crawl it. So if it's a 404 and you say the page doesn't exist, then that's fine. It doesn't cause any problems.
Okay, we can leave it.
Yeah.
Okay. So one more question. If any parent category is de-indexed, then it will impact our child subcategories pages. If any parent category is de-indexed.
So if the main category page is not in the index,
Yeah. Yeah. Parent category is de-indexed.
yeah, it can affect the subcategories there, because usually the subcategories would be linked from the main category page. It depends a little bit on how you set up your website, but usually they're linked from there. And if that category page is not in our index, then maybe we don't have links to the subcategory pages, and maybe we won't be able to crawl them. If you still link to the subcategory pages like from a menu on the website, then it doesn't matter so much, because then we can still find those subcategory pages.
Fine. So one more question. It is related to like I have some blogs and few keywords are declining to the large extent declining, and I have implemented so many techniques to improve them, but I'm not getting any results. Can you suggest me like any good techniques which I can implement to improvise these keywords, declining keywords in Google SERP? Or blog keywords, blog optimization. Apart from social media promotion, apart from content optimization, if I can go further, any techniques?
To kind of improve ranking in general, I guess, for those keywords. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's one simple approach that you can do to kind of improve
Yeah, there
the.
are various techniques, but if
Yeah.
you can suggest me any good techniques which are helpful for me to enhance the results.
So I think what I would do in a case like this is maybe take a step back and go through the SEO starter guides that we have. So we have an SEO starter guide. There are various SEO tools that also have kind of SEO starter guides, which I think are really good. And kind of work your way through those and see if there are any aspects that you're missing. A lot of those things are things you're going to say, oh, this is obvious. Like you already know all of this. But there are going to be individual things in there where you say, oh, this is actually a good idea. And this is not something that we have done in the past. And that, I think, is kind of a way of going from like you're doing some things really well to understanding, well, actually, you have the whole foundation covered really well. And then you're kind of sure that at least you're not missing anything. It doesn't guarantee that you rank better for all of those keywords, but it makes sure that you have kind of all of that foundational things ready. So like I said, like on our site, the SEO Starter Guide, I think there's from Moz is a really good SEO Starter Guide out there. Some of the other SEO tools also have really good guides. And I would just work your way through all of these from the start to the end, take notes on things that you haven't been doing, and then try to implement some of those things. Because they always have, like, maybe 9 out of 10 things are things you already know about, and 10% are things that are new there. And those 10% sometimes can be kind of the difference between being kind of a mediocre website in search to being one that is actually pretty good and has a good foundation.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank your time. Yeah.
Thanks. Cool. All right. With that, I'll take a break here with regards to the recording. I'll still be here, so those of you who still have your hands raised or who have more and more questions, feel free to stick around. But just to make sure we have a reasonable length for the recording, I'll pause it here. If you're watching this on YouTube, thanks for watching. And as always, feel free to like and subscribe the videos. Join us in one of the next Hangouts if you'd like to. It's always interesting to see what pops up. All right, let's see. Stop the recording.